Sirens, Slammers, and Service, a podcast for female first responders by female first responders. My name is Nikki Clucci, and I will be your host. As a former correctional officer in Alberta for almost 2 decades and the founder of Blue Line Fitness Testing, which provides law enforcement fitness testing and first responder wellness workshops, I started this podcast as a way for female first responders to share the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of their daily work. I want to showcase the unique perspectives, skill sets, and personalities that women bring to a first responder career and share their stories. So get ready to laugh your ass off, learn a whole bunch, and be inspired by some pretty badass women. Let's go. Hey guys, we are back, and today I am joined by a friend who is not from Canada, our second guest this season, not from Canada. Today I am joined by Natalyn Lewis, and it goes by Natty, so we're going to be calling her Natty for the episode. She is coming to us all the way from Utah in the US, which is freaking rad. Natty is the founder and CEO of Ascend EQ, Emotional Intelligence, and she developed a framework to help people move from survival to thriving. She's been working with law enforcement for over 4 years and has created an approved curriculum in corrections in Utah that's utilized by both their inmates and their staff, as well as their external stakeholders like parole officers, judges, senators, etc. So huge wealth of knowledge, bringing us a ton of really awesome information today on how we can really do that shift from survival mode to thriving mode when we're working as a first responder, and with a kind of a special focus, I guess, on corrections. So welcome, Natty. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
Very excited. I have to ask you, is it nice in Utah right now? Like, is it still warm?
It's starting to get cold. We have the cold front is coming in. There's snow starting to dust the mountains. So for any of you skiers who like the Utah snow, it's shaping up to be a decent season.
There you go. That's awesome. Yeah, it just started to get cold here too. It's like this morning I woke up and I was like, oh, okay, like it's time to pull on like the long sleeves and like get the coat out and stuff like that. So
I'm wearing the sweatshirt today. We've moved from t-shirt weather for sure. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so excited to chat with you. And so you found our podcast via our episode with Stacey Borden. So I believe that was episode 3 this season. Stacey is a first responder who has founded her CX Solid Foundation, basically, again, working to provide innovative mental health strategies for correctional officers. And so you kind of jumped on that and really liked that episode and then reached out. And I thought, what a great way to kind of segue and keep moving on that conversation. So Natty, tell me like how you kind of got into this, like where this stemmed from and now into, and then kind of into like what you're doing with this work that you're doing.
Yeah, so my background actually is in sales and marketing, and I did a great deal of market research on human behavior and emotional buying patterns. And it's kind of interesting because what we were really studying was, why do people do what they do? Why do people have certain patterns of behavior? Why will somebody watch a commercial? Why will 3 different people watch the same commercial and one person buys the product immediately? One person puts it in their cart, never checks out, and the other person is annoyed as heck at the commercial and turns the thing off. Why do people behave the way they do? Why do we behave differently from a state of emotion than from a state of logic and reason? Why do we make the choices that we make? And from that state of research and market research in human behavior, I deep dived into human behavior and really understanding the brain and mostly using that from a marketing perspective until about 10 years ago, when I had my own struggle with anxiety. I had an anxiety panic attack that was so severe, it hospitalized me to the tune where I couldn't even use my arms and my legs. And I had never had anxiety as a part of my life before that. I didn't know what it was. I was completely petrified and terrified about what was happening to me physically, what was happening to me emotionally. And I looked at some options that were given to me at the hospital. And when the number one side effect of the medication they wanted to put me on was depression and suicidal tendencies, I was like, this does not seem like I'm headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
And so I sought for understanding. I was deeply afraid of what I was experiencing. And I realized that fear was just adding to my experience. And I realized I needed understanding. And I sought out a deep dive. And I found a fascinating correlation with the things that I had already learned from emotions and human behavior into where these things stem from. And then I partnered with a nonprofit organization called My Story Matters, and they had 14 years of research and development in this space. And between all of my book and my speaking and the things that I'd been doing in this area connected to theirs, we were able to create a framework together that we've been rolling out for the last 4 years and across the nation, from anywhere from corporate executives to government leadership to inmates and staff. And so it's been a remarkable journey, and I feel incredibly blessed to be part of the work.
That's phenomenal. I think, like, I just, processing all the things you were saying, like, to have come from a very, very personal experience of anxiety, of that panic attack or multiple panic attacks, right? I think a lot of times we come to this, like, again, learning about the human brain, learning about human behavior. We like, again, as a correctional officer, I studied human behavior like irregularly all the time because you're with people all day long and you're watching these behaviors and things. And I was always fascinated with it, that psychology, sociology side of things when I was in university. And then, but you always kind of see it from like that outside perspective of like, oh, a panic attack, or oh, a depressive episode, or oh, like a psychotic episode, and you don't really understand until you actually go through it. And then you're like, oh, okay, now I get what is going on. Now I get suicidal thoughts. Now I get, before, oh, how could that person have done that? Like, how could they have thought that the world was that bad? Oh no, when you get there, you feel it, and you think to yourself, I never thought I would get here, but here I am, right? So I love that it was like, not that it was awful that it happened to you, but that it came from such a personal place that really catapulted you into this work. And then just like, again, to hear, you're teaming up with a nonprofit. And so My Story Matters. So what exactly were they doing before you guys teamed up?
They were primarily working in the similar space, but with refugees, victims of human trafficking, and a lot of children coming from hardship situations like foster care. And we brought this thing together. We were actually encouraged to bring it into a curriculum into incarceration. And they said, will it work? Will what you guys have put together work? And we said, well, are they humans? Because it seems to work for all humans. And it's just been really remarkable to see the types of results that we've gotten and to see just the impact we've been able to have in a short period of time. And we're just incredibly thrilled to have the opportunity to continue.
Yeah, like, well, and I love that you've kind of encompassed not just the inmates. You're also the staff, and then also the stakeholders that are also dealing with these people. And then above, because, and we've talked about this on, oh my gosh, so many of my episodes, right? If the admin are separated or don't have a clue what's going on with the front line, which a lot of times there is that division, there is that separation. They look at it from that purely academic point of like, oh, okay, this is what's happening, but they don't actually know what's happening. But then when you put them in that and you say, this is what's happening, and you give them like a taste, or they've gotten a taste of it because they've had something happen to them. And then they start to realize like, oh, and my actions then filter down on top of these people who are also struggling to survive. They're not thriving, they're struggling to survive. And the actions that I take are affecting these people and creating worse situations for them. So I think it's phenomenal that you guys have like incorporated that full, circle of life, I guess, around, corrections and what parts and players are part of it. So that's, yeah, very cool. So the framework that you guys created, is it like, did you just basically kind of take your own experience and go, how do I help? How do I help myself? How do I help others, and create the framework from that? Or was it more like you already kind of had an idea of what needed to be done? It just became more of like a formalization process.
It was really, we combined my kind of 20 years of research and development in this space with their 14 years of research and development space. And it's very science-backed, evidence-based. We brought in theories and principle that have stood the test of time. And we brought it all together. Like if you would probably take the compilation of about 120 different self-help or personal development books, theories, or principles that have come through, plus some of the age-old sage wisdom, if you will, that have never been refuted, then it becomes something that starts to create the foundation of this framework. So we brought the whole thing together and said, a lot of people are trying to do one thing. One thing is never going to get it done. There has to be the connecting dots between these various pieces. And so I'll give you just a simple example that everybody, all of your listeners will understand. But as we started to work with those on the inside, we started to recognize the absolute necessity of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Mm-hmm.
So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, long-based science, it's evidence-based, it's theory-based, it's been approved and not disputed for a long time, and also not utilized properly. But you take somebody who's on the inside and they're about to get out. Why do we have such a problem with recidivism rates? Well, we had a gentleman who got out, and he had changed in terms of what he wanted in his life, and he'd been, I'm never coming back here. I'm never coming back here. I'm going to be a different person. I'm never coming back. But he got out, and he had a job all lined up for himself, which was going to provide for his basic physiological needs. It was going to give him money to pay rent, to have a place to live, and food to eat, right?
Yep.
But then he got out, and he didn't have his driver's license because it had expired while he was on the inside. But then he needs to take the bus to get his driver's license, but he can't get on the bus because he needed a bus pass. He couldn't buy a bus pass because he needed a debit card, but he couldn't get a debit card because he didn't have his driver's license. So therefore, he doesn't get on the bus because he can't get his driver's license, so he doesn't show up to his job. And then he's fired from his job on his first day. And in a matter of 24 hours, his entire physiological world crumbled. And now he's looking at, he doesn't have a place to live, and he doesn't have money, and he doesn't have food. What is the natural instinct of man in human survival that is now going to drive and dictate his behavior?
Yeah.
He's going to go do what he knew before to get money.
Yep.
Or he's going to go show up where he can show up to get 3 hots and a cot. That is what he's going to do, because basic survival will take over all of the uncomfortableness of being locked up.
Yep.
The freedom, which was part of self-actualization and esteem, cannot win the day when physiological needs are not met.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so when we took that's just one example of a principle that we brought into application. We said, now that by itself can't stand alone. It's not going to solve the problem. And it must be considered as a part of understanding that these guys can't go. They all start right at love and belonging in the middle of the pyramid. And they all spend all their time locked up thinking about family members they disappointed and people that they've lost and their baby mama they want to get back to, and all the things that they're totally focused on. And you're like, that's all lovely. But if you go back to your buddy's couch, which is where you got arrested from, you're not going to make it because there's safety there and your physiological needs are actually not met.
Yeah.
And so bringing that to their awareness and understanding is fascinating what it does for those on the inside. Now you take that same principle and apply it to a corrections officer. It's not the same. You have a job and you have income and you have a place to live and you have money to buy food. The question here is, are we using the money that we have to buy food and the place that we have to live to actually create safety, to actually produce love and belonging, and to actually create a life that we want in self-actualization or not? And a lot of times for corrections officer, the answers are that they're not any more safe with those things than those locked up on the inside because they're not using them properly or they don't know how. And so teaching those principles is a part of what we do. So hopefully that gives you a good example of just one basis of science that we use inside of the framework, just as a type.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Blue Line Fitness Testing is a premier law enforcement fitness testing and training center based in Edmonton. Specializing in helping individuals prepare for the physical demands of a career in law enforcement, we offer comprehensive fitness evaluations, specialized training programs, and classes tailored to meet the unique needs of our clients. Our facility hosts a range of classes and are committed to fostering a supportive and empowering environment where clients can achieve their fitness goals. Our team includes experienced trainers who bring specialized expertise in law enforcement, self-defense, personal training, and rehabilitation. We engage through our community through challenges, events, and our podcast, and we are dedicated to helping individuals succeed in their fitness journeys and career aspirations in law enforcement. Are you looking to get started with your career? Come see Blue Line Fitness Testing, and we'll get you there. Yeah, it's huge. And so for our listeners that don't know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, basically it's a pyramid. It's a pyramid, and the bottom is our physiological needs. So just like Natty's explaining, like our basic survival, food, water, like those types of things, safety, some like a place to live, like those types of things. That's a basis. And then it goes up through our levels until we get to the peak of the pyramid, which is self-actualization, which is essentially in the terms of the kids, living your best life in the best way possible, right? So whatever that might look like, and it's different for everybody. Living your best life might be being really financially stable and happy, and you can do the things that you want to do, and you have the time and the energy to do those things with the financial. That could be what your living your best life is. Living your best life could be that you have, you've surrounded yourself with family and friends that make you feel safe and that you have fun with, and that you're able to, again, spend time and energy with them versus trying to make that time and energy to spend with those. So there's all different, whatever your self-actualization is different. But I absolutely 1000% resonate with the example that you gave, because being the releasing manager in corrections for so long, the amount of times that I would have those inmates that would, in that exact situation or similar, and I would always say to them, I need you to have plan A, B, C, D, E, and F. You cannot just rely on plan A, which is your buddy's going to come pick you up when you get out. What happens if your buddy doesn't come? What happens if your buddy is driving a stolen ride? What happens if, this happens or this happens or this happens? What is your backup? Because if you don't have 7 backup plans, you are going to resort back to what you know, which is robbing the cabbie, not paying it when he drops you off, and then you're going to get picked up and I'll see you again in 8 hours. And sometimes they would like, no, Miss T, you won't see me again. And I'm like, I will see you in 8 hours, or it would be like, nope, Miss T, I got this plan and I got this plan and I got this plan. And then they'd be out and you'd maybe not see them for a year, maybe 2 years. And they come back in and you're like, dude, like, what happened? Like, I haven't seen you in a year. I haven't seen you in 2 years. Oh, I did so good. I had a job and I was doing this and I was doing this and I was doing that, and they, like you said, they'd layered up that they had those physiological needs met, but then they didn't have their social needs. The social needs weren't being met. So they were trying to stay on the straight and narrow. They weren't hanging out with their old friends. They weren't doing the gang life. They were trying to stick because they knew if they went there, shit's going to go south. But then they're lonely. And they're like, all I was doing, I'd go get up, go to work, come home, sit in my apartment by myself, doing nothing. I had nobody to talk to, nobody to go to dinner with, nobody to and so what do? Well, I'm just gonna get a hold of so-and-so. We're just gonna go for one beer, gonna go see them. And then it either one beer turns into 10 beers and now you got a DUI and you get picked up, or one beer turns into let's meet again. And then you're sucked back into that life. Right. And so it, like you said, it just builds on itself. And unless all of those needs are met, the fall down to the bottom is going to occur again. So I think that's fascinating. And I love how you switched it for correctional officers and for those different things, because it is. I mean, sometimes I literally just had this conversation with somebody, when was it, Monday night, who wants to get into corrections. And he was talking about like, oh, I hear there's tons of overtime and you can make like so much money and da-da. And I was like, yeah, like you can. I mean, I would not recommend working as much overtime as people do, because you become a zombie, you become useless, you become a liability to me as your partner, because you can't even keep your eyes open and you're not picking up on cues on the unit because you're so tired, right? So I wouldn't do that. And I said, then the other flip side is don't live beyond your means. Don't start to equate your OT wage with what you actually make, because the amount of people I saw go buy the $100,000 truck, buy the $60,000 boat, buy the, blah, 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 the trailer, the quads, the skidoos, the house that's way beyond what they could afford. And then all of a sudden OT dries up, or their position changes. They're not working nights anymore. So they're not getting extra shift differential. And all of a sudden that money that they've based their life on is not coming in. And they start to panic and they start to lose their things and things start to get repoed and things start, right? And then they're back down until that lowest level of like, I don't have these physiological needs. They're going to take my house because I mortgaged way beyond what I could pay and the interest rate changed and I don't make that OT anymore. So that's amazing. And I'm very much in that like science-based, like you said, that kind of research proven like work that you're talking about. So very cool. So what else is there? Like, what else are you guys delving into?
Yeah. So one of the other big pieces we dive into, and I wanted to bring this attention back to the story you told previously, is we dive a great deal into identity. So there's a tremendous amount of work that's been done. I don't know if you've ever read the book by Maxwell Maltz on psychocybernetics. But they did a tremendous amount of work that if you cannot see yourself as someone else, however you see yourself, define yourself, and attach yourself to, you will behave that way, even when you try to hit behavior. So one of the things we teach is that we have to have understanding first. Once we have understanding, we can shift beliefs, and beliefs will actually drive our own natural behaviors. Whereas what happens traditionally in corrections is we try to address behaviors before and with no adjustment to belief and no adjustment to understanding. So you take the person who walks in and they claim and they own, I am an addict. I am. It's who I am. I'm an addict. My mom was an addict. My dad was an addict. They did time. I'm doing time. This is what addicts do. We do time. I mean, how many times did you hear that story? Mm-hmm. And that's the narrative. So if that is who I am, how did I observe that? Well, I observed that because I witnessed my mom or my dad have that behavior, or my friend have that behavior, and everybody called them an addict. Or somebody called me an addict one time. Well, if I'm an addict, how do I show up? How do I behave? What do addicts do? Mm-hmm. And based on what they do, how do they feel about themselves and what do they believe about themselves? And how do they picture their life and what they're capable of? And once you see that cycle just play out, they call it neurons that fire together, wire together. Well, pretty soon we've created a neural pathway that literally says, because I'm an addict, this is how I show up. This is how people see me. This is how I act. This is how I feel. And this is how my life is going to turn out. And so their capacity to change that behavior, they literally have to fight themselves to change that behavior. And what they normally do is they go try to attack behavior without understanding the formation of the neural pathway, without understanding how it got there and how they formed it, and without trying to change the picture. And we go into these settings, and corrections officers, again, do the same thing. What is a corrections officer? If you're a corrections officer, how do you know? How do you behave if you're a corrections officer? And then how do you feel about yourself? And what picture do you hold of yourself as that officer? And if that's who you are, or the identity that you claim, when you show up that way with your relationships, how well does that work out? Mm-hmm. When you become the officer to your children, how well do they respond to that? Mm-hmm. You become an officer in religious settings, how well does your spiritual life pan out for you? Mm-hmm. When you're the officer, when you're a corrections officer physically, what does that look like? Because it looks like, in the US anyways, one of the shortest lifespan careers in history. Mm-hmm. So if I am a corrections officer, does that picture look like I die at 58, divorced, with a miserable life? I eat Dr. Pepper and Cheetos for lunch, and I work 12 hours a day on minimum, and I'm always financially strapped. If that's the picture of a corrections officer, and I claim that as my identity, how well does that work out for me? Mm-hmm. And what we talk about is, what does the picture really need to look like? Why did you get into this field? What kind of career do you want to have? What kind of life do you want to have? What kind of health do you want to have? How do you want to show up? Because you're not a corrections officer. That's simply your career. Mm-hmm. Who are you as a person? Like, I've interacted with you now here for the last 35 minutes or so, and I can tell you right now, you're not a corrections officer. That's a part of the life, part of the story, part of the career. But you're this unstoppable woman who has a desire to impact positively the lives of other people. When you claim that, when you claim this unstoppable woman who impacts lives positively, and you show up like that, how does that woman show up to take care of her own health? What choice does she make when she walks in for lunch? And she could eat chicken and a salad, or she could have Dr. Pepper and cheese puffs. Which one does she choose? Mm-hmm. When she's a corrections officer, she's going to choose Dr. Peppers and cheese puffs. When she's an unstoppable woman, positively impacting herself and those around her, she eats chicken. Mm-hmm. Do you see the difference in the behavior? Yes. And as we come in, and again, as we work, we really dial into who you are is not what you've done. Mm-hmm. What you've done is still part of your story. It has consequences. It'll be story. It'll be part of your past. And it does not have to be part of your future, not in this moment or any moment moving forward, because that has not been created yet. And so if you create that moment that is 1 minute from now, from your narrative of the past, if I am an addict, what will your next minute look like? But if you create that moment, not from I am an addict, but I am a creator, what will the next minute look like? When you create your minute, not from I am a corrections officer, but I am an unstoppable force, positively impacting other people's lives, what does the next minute of creation look like? And so that's a big piece of what we do as well, is really dig into identity.
That is, oh, I love, like, just goosebumps. Because like coming from a yoga background too, like what you put out into the universe is what comes back to you, is a lot of what we, talk about. And a lot of it is very similar to what you're saying. You've just broken it down very nicely scientifically, right? But that's exactly it, is if I show up like this, that is what is going to come back to me. If I show up in this, whatever identity, belief of identity, that's what's coming back to me. And you nailed it right on the head. I would say for every single CO that's listening, fuck, like, could you have summed up what a correctional officer is any better? No, guys, she fucking knocked it out of the park, right? Like, and exactly that. And I've done episodes on this. Your identity cannot be wrapped up in your job. You cannot, because if it does, if you do get to that stage, and if you're new to the podcast and you haven't listened to previous episodes, I preach this. If your identity is wrapped up in your job, when the job leaves or you leave the job, you are going to be at a loss. You are going to be grieving who you were, who you believed you were. That was your whole life, was that job, those coworkers, that money, that prestige, that status, that uniform, right? That is what you've now created as your identity. That's going to be devastating to you. Or if you continue down that road, then that becomes your sole social circle, your sole, that's the only people you're talking to. Burnout happens real fucking fast when you get to that way, because that's everything you talk about. That's everything you focus on. All you're putting out into the world is corrections, jail, shitty people, judgmental, dealing with the worst of the worst of the worst. And guess what? You start to see everything and everybody that way. So yeah, you knocked it out of the park. And I really like, again, how you're saying, like, we totally, like, I'm thinking back to when I would work the range. We attack the behaviors. You can't act like this. You can't, in the real world, you can't go and punch somebody out because they took your freaking ramen. So how can we work on a better strategy, guys? Like, let's be, you're de-escalating after a situation. Like, what's a better choice we could have made? But you're not addressing the identity is, I'm an inmate and I'm a thug and I'm a leader on the unit, and I have to show up like this, because if he takes my ramen and I don't step up, then the rest of the range is going to be like, what? Oh, well, let's go take all of his ramen, right? So yeah, like, unreal.
Well,
Cool.
the really cool part about the brain is the brain loves patterns. The brain lives in efficiency of patterns. And so how many times have these people developed the pattern of what I am a thug looks like? How many times have they developed the pattern of I am a criminal, what that looks like? It's not any different when we take it into I am a corrections officer. How many times have we reestablished the pattern of what that looks like? How many observations have we had of what that looks like? And the irony of the situation is that you look at corrections officers and they have this low lifespan, and a great deal of them also count down the days, hours, and minutes until retirement. It's like part of the badge of honor is I could walk up to any single corrections officer and they could tell me the day, hour, minute that they're going to retire. And I'm like, it's amazing. You own this identity of this office that you hold, and you like it so much that you know the exact moment it gets to come to an end.
Yeah.
And what I've found is corrections officers are some of my favorite people on the planet. And I want for them to recognize that who they are is not that. That's your career. That's your job. Yeah. You aren't that individually. And how important it is that corrections officers take care of themselves. Because like you said, the constant stream of observation in front of their face is not great. They're watching maybe the worst of humanity in front of them all day long. And so to work with corrections officers and helping them to give themselves personal attention every day and on purpose to start to make that shift has been something that has been a great, very fulfilling part of what I've had the opportunity to do, to walk in a room and start with the basics and say, look, guys, we're going to start. The very first basic we're going to start with is we have to stop pretending that we have mental health and physical health. You're not two different beings walking around here. Did I miss half of you? Where did the other half of you go? We are a mental, spiritual being having a physical experience.
Yeah.
Which means that we have to have a physical experience. You got to take care of yourselves. And so that looks like foundationally sleep, hydration, sunlight, nutrition, movement, super simple. And we're going to dial into some super simple steps in each one of those and just take action towards taking care of ourselves. because our body will take care of 60% of what we need to survive. But I've never met with a corrections officer when we've started working with them that is living beyond survival. They start with survival. Yep, I'm surviving. I'm getting just enough sleep to be able to function like a zombie in subconscious land through my whole life and wake up and do it all over again like Groundhog's Day. And I'm getting just enough nutrients out of my cheese puffs and Dr. Pepper to like get my pants on every day. And I'm getting just enough sunlight to not look like I'm actually dead, right? Just barely, but not more. And I'm just moving just enough that I am not calcifying in my standing position in my post, right? Like, and we talk about this because the job literally engages in those behaviors. When we're intentional, when we really just stop and say, okay, I'm going to intentionally take care of who I am because I'm not a corrections officer. I'm a powerful, unstoppable force that has the intention to help care for other people. And that includes me. So I'm going to wake up on purpose and I'm going to actually take in some electrolytes to turn my brain on. And I'm going to take something to work with me instead of eating in those food trucks where death is the secondary option to nutrition, right? Like I'm going to actually choose some food. Yeah. And I am going to intentionally walk on my 15-minute break, like littlest, tiniest things, right? Where it's amazing what happens. I like to describe it like we all turn on the light when we wake up in the morning, but some of us are living on this totally the dimmer switch all the way down low. And what we want to do for people is to bring that dimmer switch up and live your life brightly and shine like you deserve to shine because you do some of the most important work we have to possibly do in this world. And no one deserves to take care of themselves more, and probably nobody naturally takes care of themselves less.
Yes. Yeah. I find like what you're saying too is a lot of times you don't realize that you're living in the dimmer switch until you get out. And this is something that I thought I was living a fairly healthy life as a CO. I was, working out all the time. I was eating pretty good, not awesome all the time, but it shifts and you do the best you can. But, there was vegetables and there was fruit and there was like, I wasn't Dr. Pepper and Cheetos all the time, thank God. And I was sleeping, I thought, enough, right? And then when I left corrections and then the dimmer switch was lifted and I looked back and I thought to myself, what the fuck have you been doing for the last 17 years? And I mean, maybe it wasn't even 17 because you start out and you're just a young pup and you're living your best life, right? So you think, but it totally was that. It was that I was surviving. I wouldn't say I thought I was thriving because we would laugh about that. I'd be like, hey, how's your day? I'm surviving, not thriving, as we'd pass each other on the hallway, right? But I didn't think that I was barely surviving when I was in there. And then when I got out and started living a life that was not corrections shift work, and I was like, oh yeah, you were just surviving. And anybody that I've talked to that has left the career for whatever reasons, retired, this, that, that's exactly it. Once you leave, you go, whoa, okay, so this is how the rest of the world lives out here. Wow, it's totally different. So how do we because I know I literally can hear my listeners giggling along kind of with what you're saying and being like, yeah, but that's not me. Yeah, but that's not me. Yeah, but that's not me, because they're in it. They're in it and they don't realize that it's them. So how can we make people realize, or I guess we can't make anybody do anything, but how can we help our first responder audience realize that they are in survival mode, and how can we get them to the thriving mode?
Yeah, well, the first is to recognize that regardless of what your career is, the vast majority of humans that I get the opportunity to work with are living this way because they don't know any different. So I would give yourself a litmus test. The first one is this. When you wake up in the morning, do you wake up on purpose with intention and truly get excited about your day? Or are you going through the motions and before you know it, your clothes are on and you're at work and you can't even remember how you got there because it was like Groundhog's Day? If you are living in a pattern of subconscious behavior, you're surviving, not thriving. That's one good litmus test. Another one is when you go to eat, move, or sleep. Do you do so because you want it and you're intentional about seeking it out for your own good? Or are you just going through the motions? That's another really good test, because when we just go through subconscious patterns of survival, we will eat, sleep, and move only out of something that's just natural. Like we literally just did it. We didn't think about it. We just did it. And so and it does not mean good nutrition, right? Usually doesn't mean nutrition. Usually doesn't mean good movement patterns. Sometimes it's just out of habit or pattern that's been created. And I would just reiterate, most human beings are in this space. There's a reason why one of the top searched Google searches of our day is how to be happy. How can I be happy? Why is everybody unhappy? You don't have to be a corrections officer to be in this space. You just have to be living a life with a lack of intention, going through subconscious patterns, and you feel like every day is Groundhog's Day. And I just wake up and do it all over again the next day. And that pattern is not uncommon, and it's actually easier than we think to shift. And our objective is, I don't want somebody to have to end their career in corrections to have to find themselves. I want them to find themselves and then find joy in their career, because your circumstances don't have to change. Your focus has to change to find joy. And that means we get an opportunity to be intentional about taking care of ourselves. We get an opportunity to be intentional about honoring our emotions. We get an opportunity to be intentional about showing up and actually finding some joy in who we are, and letting the career be a path where we get to express who we are, and not letting the career become who we are.
Yes. So good. Every sentence that you're saying, I'm just like, oh my God, yes, yes, yes. So the work that you're doing, it's insane. Like I can see the reach already that you would have in sharing this work. And even if it's one inmate out of the unit of 50 that like gloms onto this and actually is like, hey, wait a minute. Yes. Or it's one CO out of a shift of 50 that it like is like, yeah, I don't want to live in this. I am done with this. I would like to thrive. I would like to live with intention and purpose. It's such an amazing thing that you're doing, and that it's being rolled out. And so I know that we had kind of talked a little bit about, emotional freedom, like reducing anxiety, those types of things. Like how, what again are some strategies or some ways that we can start to bring this into fruition in our lives? Get ourselves out of Groundhog Day.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things we actually teach the science behind how the brain processes information and emotions to help people understand, because in corrections, it's uniquely different. We all have a fight or flight response. And when the normal human race walks down the street and goes to work, they rarely trigger that fight or flight response unless it's an emotional trigger. Like, I'm not emotionally safe because I have a boss that looked at me weird, and now I don't know if I have my job, and I get freaked out about that. But corrections officers are going to experience the natural fight or flight response every day just by showing up to work, because there's very real physical implications. And we need that alarm to keep us safe. The difference is, because we don't actually understand what both turns the alarm on and shuts the alarm off, we don't intentionally ever turn the alarm off. We don't intentionally ever engage with that alarm. And then when we experience it, we don't know how to process that thing. So take the officers, they go and they're on an IMS call, and they're off, and they see horrible things. We were in the prison on Wednesday, and there was some stuff going down, and it wasn't pleasant. And officers have to be on the scene for that. It's going to create a lid flip, we call it, situation where you are going to enter fight or flight, and your body is going to have a physiological response to that. When we enter fight or flight, blood flows to the extremities. And it does that because if you're a fighter, you got to be able to prepare to lay a hit or take a hit. And if you're a flighter, you got to be able to run and move quickly. Well, in corrections, you don't get to do either of those things. Usually you have to be completely restrained, and you can't leave. Mm-hmm. So if my natural instinct is to do these things to protect myself, but in this job, I have to train myself to push and shove down that natural instinct, where does the natural finish of that cycle happen? Well, we finish the IMS, and then what do we get to do? Oh, we get to go sit down in a desk and fill out paperwork. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, all of those emotions are just shoved down in there. And then we get in the car to drive home, and somebody pulls out in front of us, and we're flipping birds and screaming F-bombs and yelling at these people. They have just committed this world's single greatest crime because they pulled out right in front of us, and we're going to lose our absolute crap on these people. And then we walk in the door and our kid says, Mom, 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 Mom. And we're like, whoa, because we never let go of any of that emotion.
Yes.
There must be a physical response to the emotion that we're feeling. And we're not talking about in the moment of. The safety measures that officers have been taught to control that mechanism are important. What we teach and work with the officers on is when you're done with the incident, do not go sit in a desk and fill out paperwork and shove that emotion down. You get in the gym. You push the weight, you go for a run, you go for a walk, you take in a deep breath, you reset the nervous system, and you honor the fact that that beautiful alarm system is keeping you safe. You don't shove the emotions of that alarm system and tell it to shut up for another time because I got paperwork to fill out. And then carry all that crappy emotion with you until it overflows onto your loved ones and your relationships and the people around you. They're like, what the heck is your problem? Like, if you saw what I saw today, you'd be like this too. You don't have to be like that because you saw that. Yes, you're going to feel that way. And that is absolutely valid. And you can physically engage with those emotions before you ever leave or on your way home. So that it doesn't come out on the people you love the most. You do not have to have crappy relationships because you're a corrections officer. And so one of the things we teach in you'll appreciate this because you're a yoga instructor, but we teach whether you're fight or flight, the body's autonomic nervous system and sympathetic nervous system need to be reset after we've gone through an experience like this. And one of the things that can reset this, and I'm going to walk you through this exercise because anybody listening, this is super powerful, is literally to sit in a chair or stand, but your feet need to be firmly on the floor. And then you start and you curl your toes. So curl your toes up really tight, as tight as you can curl them. You got it?
Yep.
Tighten your calves and then put your heels on the ground and lift your toes so that that's just super tight down there. Now flex your quads and flex your butt, flex your abs, flex your shoulders, and now pull it back like this. And now I want you to clench your hands like everything's super tight. Now take a deep breath in through your nose. Hold it. And then we're not going to let go. We're going to go spike it again. And now when you let go of everything, I want you to make a sound from your bronchioles and release everything. Shake for a second. Now I want you to pay attention to what your head feels like.
Yeah.
You feel like somebody just hit a decompression valve and it just went. Psss.
Totally.
If this was my brain, and when I'm in fight or flight, my brain looks like this. What that exercise just does is it resets the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems. And it closes the lid.
Yeah.
And reconnects our cortex with our brainstem so that we can logically process information with our conscious brain again. And so it's very powerful, and it helps people to go from that situation of high intensity to like, oh, I'm taking back control of my brain and body again.
Yes.
And that ability to do that and then go for a walk, go for a run, hit the gym. You don't have to go there for long periods of time. It only takes 3 to 5 minutes actually for your brain to fully process and finish a cycle of these emotions. So it can even take 90 seconds to 3 minutes once you get practiced at it. But what we've noticed is with the officers we're working with that will engage in this after those high intensity moments, they're finding that they just feel so much more calm and peaceful as they go home. They're not carrying the emotions into relationships. And it's just, it's changing things. Like we had an officer that came up to us after our last training with tears in his eyes. And he says, I'm pretty sure you've saved my marriage. He said, I'm showing up. I'm able to sit. I'm able to hear my wife. I'm able to hear my kids. I couldn't hear them before because everything they said was so overstimulating because of all the stuff I had taken in all day long. I couldn't hear about another problem. I couldn't do it. And now I'm here for them. And he said, I'm pretty sure you've saved my marriage. And it was a beautiful moment. And I think powerfully instructive to help us understand that when we're in a career with this level of emotional intensity, it requires intention and personal self-care in that space as well.
Unbelievable. Guys, if say you're driving and you weren't able to do this, I want you just to try it. Just when you get out of the patrol car or you're wherever you're at and you can, it took us 30 seconds to do that? 30 seconds, rewind back to this part on the podcast and do this because physiologically the response I got was exactly what you said. I felt like, oh, whew, like just, oh my God, okay, whew, I feel so much better, right? And I wasn't even in a stressful situation. I just like felt that relief come over my body. So yeah, you guys, you got to try it. You got to try it. Please, 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 please try it. I do have a one question for you because I noticed this myself in working for as long as I did, is that I stopped having that response, that fight or flight, or I stopped, maybe I obviously didn't stop having it because your body physiologically can't, but it stopped affecting me. I remember the first, couple years, shit would hit the fan and you would feel yourself, you'd feel the spike, you'd feel the instant like, okay, it's go time, we got to go, we're going, and we're in it and we're dealing with it. Or, again, we have to show restraint. We're not in it, but now I'm the manager and now I'm giving direction and I need to think 78 thoughts at the once and also keep everybody in, my awareness and I'm banging off orders here, there, and everywhere. And I didn't have that feeling of like, okay, let's go. It just became, well, this is just fucking normal. I just come in and this doesn't matter if it's a guy getting his head beat in. It doesn't matter if it's a 6-on-1. It doesn't matter if it's a suicide. I'm coming in and I'm not having that reaction anymore. I'm not having that feeling. And then when I left for months afterwards, still same thing. No reaction, no reaction. Scary things would happen. You almost get into a car accident. Oh my God, right? And still no reaction. Like just like I would say to my friends, I feel like I'm dead. I feel like I just don't have that reaction anymore. But then gradually over the last couple of years, it started to come back. And so now if something like, near miss car accident or, you get into a really bad fight with a friend and you just feel really like, oh my God, that was awful. Like now I shake again. I never used to shake, right? Now all of a sudden, if I get out of something, I can feel like I'm starting to tremble and I'm like, I haven't felt like that in years. So how do we deal with that? If we feel like we're no longer having that fight or flight, we feel like we're dealing with it properly.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things that we talk the most about actually as we work with officers, because there's a fear, even when we first start teaching about being able to actually honor these emotions and regulate them. They're like, but wait a second, if I do that, I'm going to start feeling them again. And right now I don't feel them. And I think that's the best thing for me.
Yes.
And we talk about I understand and empathize with the feeling of safety it brings you at work. And it's also destroying relationships and making so you can't, like, emotions aren't a hot and cold valve where I can turn them on at work and then turn them off at work and turn them on at home. They're on a singular valve. They're either off or on. And so it's also what's rocking our health, because the body keeps the score. It's going somewhere, I promise you. It's rocking health and it's rocking relationships. And those two things are quality of life. And so what we talk about is like we actually gain more power when we recognize them and choose to control them than we do to shut them off. And so what happens is, if you can kind of see my hands here, you got hyperarousals when we shoot up into fight or flight. When we don't respond to hyperarousal over time, or we get hyperaroused so frequently that we can't deal with it, like in corrections, you can't fight, you can't flee, you're not responding. We shoot down underneath this window of tolerance to hypoarousal. In hypoarousal, we experience two learned trauma responses to this intensity of emotion, and they are freeze and fawn. Freeze does not always look like I'm frozen and I can't do anything, but it can look like disengagement and disassociation and disallowance of emotion. So if you meet somebody who's just had a high intensity situation and you notice that they're just kind of like the lights are on, but nobody's home, that's what's happening. Or they'll fawn, meaning they just people please. And it's like, whatever I have to do to get through this situation, let's just get it done. Those are trauma learned responses because of the intensity of the situation in hyper, where there was not an allowance to fight or flight. And so we see inside of corrections officers that a lot of them live in the space of hypoarousal, and they think that they've just gotten over it.
Mm-hmm.
I've just seen so much of it that I'm not affected anymore. Oh, you're still affected. You're just in hypoarousal instead of hyper. And so it feels differently. But in both situations, we have a disengaged cortex from the brainstem. And in both situations, it doesn't allow you to have complete control over your emotional status. And so you will feel it. And usually you'll feel it when it's really unhealthy to feel it, right? Mm-hmm. When I get home, or I feel it in other places, or I don't feel at all because I disengage, disassociate. Well, if you do that, that might get you through your day. But when your spouse or your partner or your teenager or your young child needs empathy, and they need love and they need compassion and they need joy. Those are emotions too.
Mm-hmm.
And are you taking it because we can't feel anything?
Yeah.
And that I think is my greatest concern for the officers, is because, and I understand the hesitation. And we get this question every time we teach this. Okay, but if I open up that floodgate, like what does that do to me? And we talk about safety as a primal instinct, and we want them to be safe, and we don't want to utilize this knowledge and actually create unsafety. We want to use it to create greater control and a greater sense of understanding, and the opportunity to go home and have health and have longevity and have relationship. And there is an opportunity to do both.
Mm-hmm.
So,
It's exactly like I just keep going back into my time and same thing. You do disassociate. It just gets shut down and you just don't. And then, when you come home and your kids need empathy and they need love and you've got nothing. I remember I'd come through the door, I had nothing left. And I would say, I have nothing left. I cannot deal with you right now. I've got nothing left. I had a crappy day at work. And meanwhile, your kids are just like looking at you like, okay, mom. Right. And it breaks your heart. It breaks your heart. Like I would remember thinking to myself, you're such a fucking shitty mom. Like, look at your babies that just want a hug. And the rest of me was like, but I don't fucking care because I can't do it. I don't have any more energy. I don't got any more. I have nothing left to give. And I feel terrible about it, but I don't really, because I'm just done. I'm just so done. So
and I think that's a really good distinction to make, is that cognitively and rationally, there was a piece where you're like, this doesn't seem right, but you didn't feel it. Like you couldn't feel it. There was no opportunity to feel. And that's the important part. And that's what we're trying to help with, is we want to see life improvement in this space. Like somebody doing this type of work, and how much it impacts every single one of our lives, and how important this work is. They deserve to have life that looks better than what life looks like right now. And that is why we engage in this work.
Yes. Like I said, this has to be, honestly, I want to say, one of the best episodes I've ever had. I will say that personally from my take. I don't know. I feel like my listeners would agree with me, but because what you're saying is just speaking so much truth. You're pulling the curtain back on what we all fucking know. We all know this. We all know exactly what you're talking about. And you don't have to be in corrections. Like, I've got sheriff's friends that are listening. I've got conservation friends that listen. It doesn't have to just be corrections, because listeners, that you're like this. You know that you have your fucking retirement countdown going. I just talked to a buddy from corrections, and like, we haven't talked in a couple years. And I was like, oh, hey, how's things going? Like, oh, I got this new promotion. I'm just hanging on until retirement. And I was like, buddy, you're the same fucking age as me. Like, you got 20 more years and you're still counting down to retirement. Like, what the fuck? Like, this is not how we're meant to live our lives, right? Like, it's not, guys, it's not. So I just, amazing. Like, and like, again, just bringing it into the science, I just think to me, it's so cool. It's so fascinating. The human brain and the human body, I could spend days and weeks and months learning and just filling my brain with, knowledge about the brain and how things work and how we bring it in, and how we, like you said, how we create a narrative for ourselves based on what we've observed and what we've experienced. And well, now that because of this, then this, and then this, then this, well, then this equals this, right? So, and we can retrain ourselves. We can retrain those neural pathways. We can adjust the direction that we're going. It doesn't always, just because you've done it this way, doesn't mean you have to always do it this way. So unreal. I know we're taking up a lot of time out of your afternoon, so I appreciate the time. Is there anything, I like to end up with rapid fire questions, but I want to make sure that we had an opportunity to touch on everything that you wanted to share, because it's been amazing. So is there anything else that you wanted to share with us that we haven't had a chance to chat about?
Just that I have a deep belief that you can have it all. I believe that you can't have it all unintentionally, and life is not going to hand it all to you, and you can have it all. And regardless of your chosen profession, if you will engage intentionally in your life and take care of you, and you'll take care of yourself in all the ways, with health and with relationships and with spirit, whatever that looks like to you, your spiritual connection to soul, and take care of yourself in your professional space. Like, when you do those things on purpose, you will be fascinated to what life looks like when the dimmer switch is on high.
Yes. Yes, totally. Totally. Ah, I love it. Goosebumps again. Amazing. Natty, unreal, like unreal truths, unreal information, knowledge. And you are doing awesome work. Like if you ever have a day where you're like, is it worth it? It's fucking worth it, girl. It's worth it. You are doing amazing things. Keep sharing this message. Okay. So to wrap up, I like to hit those rapid fire questions.
Right.
This one's going to be slightly different for you because you're not a shift worker, but what is your favorite food or snack when you're working? Either you're leading these sessions or you're doing something with our first responder community.
Yeah, I actually make protein pancakes to take into prison with me. I use some protein powder, some protein milk, and then I use protein pancake mix, and I mix it with fresh pumpkin and a few chocolate chips, and I bake them up. And it's 35 grams of protein in 3 pancakes, and it's a great snack, and it's easy, and I can take it anywhere.
That sounds delicious.
They're very good.
Protein milk, like what? Like one of those like boosts?
Like a Fairlife protein milk boost. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my
So
gosh.
I just mix protein powder with that, and then I use a protein pancake mix, like a Kodiak protein pancake mix. Either fresh pumpkin, or I'll use fresh apples with a cinnamon spice. Also very, very good. Throw a little nutmeg in there. And I just cook them up as pancakes, and and they're delicious, and they have really, really good macronutrient foundation.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to make these this weekend. I was just literally in my pantry looking at the Kodiak pet, and I was like, I still haven't used this. I still have not made these pancakes that I said I was going to make like months ago. So I'm going to do it. You've inspired me. I'm doing it this weekend. I'll let you know how they taste. Hopefully they taste.
There's an egg white protein powder that I love to use because it doesn't have a taste, but it just adds a ton of protein into the mix. So it ends up being a lot of protein, and I just snack on them through the day.
Yeah, which is great because we could all use more protein. Everybody, we all need more protein. Everybody does. Okay, I love it. So the next one I kind of have is like, so how do you like continue to learn, continue to kind of keep yourself up to date? Because obviously science, brain, discovery, things like this are always changing. But just to basically, in order to stay on top of your best practices and what you know is best coming down the pipe.
Yeah. So 3 things I do. I love to listen to podcasts and learn from other people's knowledge and experience. I read books and I attend conferences. And then probably one of the things that I do the most is I do a lot of self-reflective studies where I engage in whatever work I'm doing. We meet people every day, and we see new challenges and new ways that they process information. And I'll take that and actually use that as my point of study and say, what is happening with this specific situation and this specific person, that if I learned more and understood more, that I could actually make a greater impact in this area. And then that leads us into more study and deep diving. And I just love to learn. I think there's no end to truth. So just keep learning.
That's awesome. I'm the same. I am like the person that has like 6 books on the go, 3 podcasts paused halfway through. And like my friends will be like, I would get in the car and it'll be like, oh, it's this. And I'm like, oh, just skip it to the next thing. And then it's like some random like audiobook on this. I'm like, oh, sorry, like skip it to the next thing, another random podcast. And like my podcasts are from everything from like true crime to like yoga anatomy to like brain physiology, like breath technique, right? My friends are just like, you are my friend literally today. She's like, you're an enigma. She's like, you have too many facets. And I was like, I just like to learn all different things. So yep, I'm totally with you. Totally with you. Okay. And this was kind of fun. What's the biggest surprise that you've had in the last few months?
Ooh, biggest surprise. It was probably my husband deciding he wanted to shift gears and start his own company and leaving his corporate job. So that was a big surprise in our life, and it's been really exciting.
That's awesome. You know what it is? This is a thing that is like I'm seeing from my like fitness testing side of things. People are hitting a stage, and I think honestly it has a lot to do with what you've been talking about, that identity and that change of like, I am not this is not who I am. I am not living a happy life. I am not feeling like I'm thriving. I'm not. And like before, it used to be like, too bad. Too bad for you. Too bad for your feelings. Actually, you need to pay for the mortgage. So this job that you have that's you might not love is not fulfilling you, but it pays you pretty good. You need to stay there, and you're just going to have to find your goodness and your happiness outside of work, right?
Right.
But I think people really are now changing, and they're saying like, I spend 8 hours a day at minimum, 40, some 40 plus hours a week at this thing, and I'm miserable and I don't want to be like that anymore. So I am going to make the leap. I am going to make the shift, and I'm going to live a more intentional life by doing something that is way off the deep end, crazy, but it's super cool, and I'm going to jump into it. So yeah, that's amazing. I like that. Yeah, that's good. Okay, and then the last one I have, and you've given us quite a few kind of nuggets, but what is a piece of advice that you would give for somebody that's looking to get into either corrections career, first responder, law enforcement, coming into this, that they can kind of maybe arm themselves with?
Yeah. We've talked about a lot, so I'm going to go to one we haven't rested on at all. And we did talk about how important it is to take care of yourself physically. In corrections or in first responders, maybe, again, more than most careers, that whether you're in nursing or hospitals, there's 24-hour shifts, and there's overtime, and there's night shifts. And because of that, sleep is constantly disrupted. So my number one tip for you guys today is to utilize something that's called NSDR, which is non-sleep deep rest. You can YouTube it. I guess the searches are probably slightly differently in Canada than in the US. I like Andrew Huberman. He's one of my favorites. But they also have a yoga nidra kind of approach as well. You've seen that, right? But it's called NSDR, which is non-sleep deep rest. They have 10-minute segments, 15 minutes, and 20 minutes. But if you will intentionally give yourself that 10-minute rest, it's giving the brain a full cycle of REM sleep, which actually does more good for you than you can possibly imagine. And of all of the things that we work with our corrections officers on, in the first 3 to 4 weeks, the 3 things they come back and say are game changers for their whole life are NSDR, electrolytes, like intentionally drinking electrolytes throughout the day, and packing their own lunch. So if they'll do those 3 things, they're saying that's literally game changing the way they feel throughout the day and allowing them to show up differently. So those would be my 3 words of wisdom, I guess, at the end of this thing would be take care of that sleep, and knowing that your sleep schedules are going to be off, supplement it with NSDR. Drink the electrolytes. That brain is water and electricity, and it has to have electrolytes, not just water. And take care of that food. Get some nutrients.
Yeah, no more Dr. Pepper and cheese puffs, guys.
That's right.
No more for you.
Right.
Cut off.
Protein pancakes. Go for the protein pancakes.
Right. I love that, and I'm with you totally. So yoga nidra, like, certified to teach it, and it is a game changer. It is the first time I ever had a class and got to participate in it. I was like going into this, I was like, okay, yeah, whatever, like yoga, okay, as we're just gonna like sit here, like, and me with my constant brain, I was like, okay, also not gonna be able to do this. And it was, like you said, game changing. I like came out of that class and I was like, I told everybody I knew, I'm like, you guys, this is next level. We got to do this. We got to get a class. We got to get this going. Because it's unbelievable. And you feel like you're in another plane of existence. Like again, guys, you're going to do the decompression technique. You're going to do that. And then you're going to get one of these NSDRs and you're going to do it, because it is an immediate physiological response. You will immediately feel the difference. So yeah, love that. Absolutely love that. And electrolytes. Yes, I do need to drink more of those. So thank you. As I'm drinking my Diet Pepsi, and it has no electrolytes. It just has aspartame. Yeah, this is my nectar of gods. This is what I survive on, is Diet Pepsi.
No, I had a corrections officer this week ask me if it was okay if she mixed her LMNT with her Dr. Pepper, because that's the electrolyte mix. I was like, whatever. There's good, better, best. Okay, let's meet you where you're at. So let's go ahead and the LMNT to your Dr. Pepper and see how that works this week.
She's like, I'm not ready to give up the Dr. Pepper. Not yet.
But I'm going to mix my protein. I'm going to mix protein powder in my Dr. Pepper and LMNT in my Dr. Pepper. Will that get it done? I was like, hey, like I said, good, better, best. We'll meet you where you're at. Let's start somewhere.
That's awesome. Natty, this has been great. Like, thank you so much for reaching out. I'm so glad we were able to make the schedules work and get you on. And like I said, I think this episode is going to be a game changer for a lot of our listeners. And I would, highly recommend it to our listeners right now. Text somebody right this second, text somebody you know and tell them about this episode, because I guarantee you have a friend, a coworker, a spouse, a coworker's spouse that you know that is like, my husband is a piece of shit and I need to get him fixed. Send them this episode right now. Text them and tell about this episode, because there's game changers in here. Yeah, it's been a slice. I appreciate you. Any last words for our listeners?
I've had lots to say already. Just take action. Start somewhere. It's amazing. 1% difference, right? If an airplane flies off course 1 degree for 4 hours, it lands like 10,000 miles away from where it's supposed to be. And the same is true of making a 1 degree course correction in the right direction too. You can propel yourself into a future that you may not have seen possible today. So just one thing at a time, just 1 degree.
Beauty. Mic drop moment. Well done. Thank you so much. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in, listening, giving me your time, your energy, and your attention. I completely appreciate it. Make sure you check out our next episode with another badass female first responder anywhere you get your favorite podcasts. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook at bluelinefitnesstesting.com. I hope you stay safe, keep your head on a swivel, and watch your six.